I think one of the first questions I'd ask to both of you, so we're speaking with high school students, what made you interested in this career track? And, you know, when did you know that this was going to be something that you'd like to do?
Well,
and I
guess I'll start because I'm unmuted.
Shared by Christelle in the room.
Well, I want to give some encouragement to our students because I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I think that's part of what is normal. I think many of you are in these rooms as seniors trying to figure out, man, what am I going to do with my life? All I can tell you is that be good to people. Try to find a way that you can shine and make the job around what you are, because each of you have a unique gift and talent. And that was it. You know, I am a first generation college student, so I really didn't know what to expect. I was terrible in my public education setting. I just didn't do well. But doors were open for me. I walked through them and I just worked as hard as I possibly could. And next thing you know, I'm a superintendent and did all these other things in my life. But it's a normal thing to understand that you may not know what you're going to do. But there were people around me, and I would say, you know, at my church, people that were educators had gone through a world that I wasn't involved in, but they saw aspects of who I was as an individual, and they encouraged me. Hey, you'd be a good teacher. Hey, you know what? We noticed you have patience with people. So that helped guide me into going into education because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then once I was there as a special education teacher, what happened is that people would identify things like, hey, you know what, you have some leadership abilities. And next thing you know, I just started to follow these paths and that helped. So it may be the people around you too that can help guide you and see things that sometimes we can't see ourselves honestly, but other people really can to help. So I had so many people along the way that were guideposts for me.
I think Lonny said a lot of the things I was going to say. I am also a first generation college student. I will be honest, I come from the 5 bakers, my grandfather, my great grandfather, my dad, my uncle, who were very disappointed that I didn't go into the family business. They saw those leadership skills and those abilities, and it's just not what I wanted. I really wanted to go to college, and it was really important to me. And so I will tell you that my father was proud of me for having my college degrees, but he really wanted me to be a baker. So I think sometimes, as Lonny said, people in your life are really important and help guide you, but be true to yourself. If it's really what you want to do and where you want to be, then you should find that. And Lonny's absolutely correct. There are people all over that will support you and assist you. And I will tell you the other thing, I've been teaching now, this is my 38th year. I was always open to opportunities. So if my superintendent said, hey, I really need someone here, okay, I'll try that. I haven't done that before. And I liked those challenges. So be open to those things when they're offered to you. And like Lonny said, walk through those doors. Don't be afraid.
I like both those points, Trisha and Lonny, is that you always want to be listening to others, but it's sort of up to you to process how that aligns with what you think and what you really know about yourself and your skill sets. And I think it's, in a way, asking questions and hearing feedback from others can really help clarify how you feel about yourself and the options available.
There's a question.
We had a question chatted. Oh, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to that question in the chat. I think Aiden asked that, how hard is it usually when it comes to teaching? All right,
yeah,
so
I love that question, Aiden.
Yeah, well, the reason I was able to go to college, I was a Division I wrestler and I was on scholarship, and I thought I was a pretty tough guy. But I'm telling you what, when I got into my first assignment, and I had first, second, third grade students, I didn't know what I didn't know. So just understand, do the very best you can on your training, but it's tough. It is a tough job, but I had encouragement. I kept going, and then I ended up just falling in love with the career. So, but don't let anybody tell you it's not going to have its challenges, because, and I guess that's the biggest piece, is that I would say that in our profession or in our world, there are a few jobs that really are as noble as what we do as educators, because you're able to help and reach students in a way that sometimes their families cannot. And that's why I'm saying it's hard, it's tough, but anything that's really good to have is going to be tough. So I would just tell you that I saw that, and that one kind of spoke to me. I had moments where, you know, a big guy, I was in tears because it was so tough, and I wanted to be better. But another piece of advice is a gem, write this down. An old timer gave it to me. It takes 3 years to really master what it is that you're doing. And I'm telling you, I've been in so many jobs in my life. By year 3, it's either this is not a fit for me, or yes, I'm starting to get my stride and things make sense. But starting out, guys, everything will seem confusing. Stay the course. It will get better. But yeah, there's some tough days.
I love that. And I have heard the same about 3 years. And at least when I look back on my different jobs, that time frame makes a lot of sense. That's just when you really start to hit your stride. You sort of have mastered what you need to know to be able to really explore what you can do for your potential. Lonny, I'm curious, what specifically have you found most challenging in education? It could be different positions, but what was sort of that like task that you were like, wow, this is much more difficult than I thought?
You know, it's not so much the kids, sometimes it's the adults. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm telling you guys this, as whatever profession you go into, when you have people, you have problems. And that's just the name of the game. But if you can develop a culture where people are clear on what it is that they're there to do, that they look out for one another, it's amazing what can be done. Because I've been in some very tough environments that very few people wanted to work in. But when we had developed an environment, a culture where we all had each other's backs, that our mission was to do what we could for these kids first and foremost, and then each other, then you could see the impossible start to happen. So just understand the importance of culture, because it sounds so cliche, but culture truly does trump strategy. When you have people that are committed to the mission and to each other, it's amazing what you're able to do. So I think that was the biggest eye opener, is that, you know, you can have toxic environments where people they lose sight of what it is that they're there to do. So that right there was the eye opener. We know that kids come with concerns and issues and things that we have to help them overcome, but sometimes it was the adults that was the hardest thing for me.
Very good. Trisha, anything you want to add from your perspective? Do you have a hard job? Tell us.
I think that many people think that teaching is a 9-month-a-year job, and it is easy. It is not. It is a hard job. You take work home with you. You talk to parents at night because they're working till 7, so you extend. I always would go in early, and kids would be in my room before school. It is a very time-consuming job. And so I always tell my students in Intro to Ed, teachers don't really have summers off. We do professional development. We take classes. We're training. We're getting ready for the next, but you are and as a teacher in your community, you are always in the eyesight. So you are part of moral and ethical fiber of your community. So I think as teachers, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's an everyday, all day job. And I think that that's one thing sometimes my college students aren't aware of, that you're really on all the time.
That makes a lot of sense, Trisha. I'm curious, you've done a lot of different grade levels. What ended up driving you to higher education?
It was a goal from me since I was a young girl that I wanted a doctorate. And so even though no one in my family had even a bachelor's degree, that higher attainment was just really important to me. So I feel that I worked hard in the K-12 setting, but then I also feel that I have a lot to share with future teachers with all the experience I have. So it's a blend of two things.
Building on that, I think this is a good question from Sid. What do you see as next for you in your career? You've both sort of talked about this idea of lifelong learning, and Trisha just talked about your drive to accomplish something. What's next for you?
Well, for me, I have 7 children. My last one's in college, so I'm seeing a finish line right there. One graduates in May and one more next year. So you don't realize sometimes as a parent that your career goals wrap up with your kids, but it is very true. So I do see that after that, I don't know where I'll go. I plan on teaching for a while more, but who knows what door will open for me next. Love the challenge.
I'm kind of enjoying the phase of life I'm in right now. My first 20 plus years of education have been in very high stress, high pressure situations in large urban. I worked in Toledo Public. I was a principal in 3 different districts, was a chief of staff. I did a lot of work and then went down to the state. And at this point, there's points in your life where you have to breathe. And I've enjoyed what I'm doing here. I have 3 children. One's graduated, and one's graduating this year too. But I don't want to put a sacrifice on time that I have for them either. So this has been really kind of a nice transition for me. And so I'm enjoying what I have at this point. But down the road, who knows? I mean, some of these doors open, and you can't be afraid to go through them. But then you also have to in your career understand this. Is that there's a price to every position that you can aspire to be into. And that's something that I wish somebody would have told me earlier, because especially if you're going to be a superintendent, if you're starting an education, these are very pressure cooker type jobs that are very difficult, very public, and it takes a toll on people. So those are things you have to understand, is that while, yeah, you may be in charge of a lot of things and make a nice paycheck, you got to find out what it is that you're designed to do and how long are you able to continue to do that. Some people are built for it. So that's where you really do some soul searching and find out, there's an old saying that says heavy is the crown, and it truly is. So when you're at the top, believe me, there's a lot of things that are shooting for you, but it's a necessary thing you have to do. But also weigh in, what type of life do I have? Do I want to have? How much time do I want to have on my own to do things with my own family? How much time do I really want to devote to my career? Those are all things that you need to think about. And in the education world, you can do things that, pretty much can be pretty much done a couple hour after school's done, or things that can consume your day every day. So there's a gamut of things that you can do, but that's just a bit of advice that I wanted to pass on to people.
That's great advice, Lonny. And I'm wondering if you both can talk about that a little bit more as students are thinking about themselves and their skill sets, kind of the environments that they're drawn to. You both have been in the classroom, you've been administrators, you've been at different grade levels. If you had to make some generalizations on where you think certain skill sets do best, what would you have to say?
I think you have to be adaptable. If you're a teacher, you have to be adaptable. Of course, creative and loving and caring, but you really have to be adaptable. You might start with a lesson plan in the morning and it goes poof in the first 20 minutes. And you really just have to be able to work and adapt and flex on your feet. And it's just the way it is. There are all kinds of wonderful things that happen during a school day. Some go smoothly and sometimes not. A fire alarm goes off and kids are upset, or who knows, right? But I think the biggest skill, no matter what grade you're teaching, is that flexibility and being able to adapt and just be on your feet and make good decisions.
Yeah, I think for sure flexibility. A year ago when COVID hit, you talk about a very tough, thing for most adults. Many mid-career people were not very familiar with how to use computers, let alone how to instruct remotely. So that's something that is hugely important, to be able to be flexible. The other thing too is you have to be real. I think you guys know your students. You can go through your mind and find out which teachers really cared for you, which ones were there because they absolutely had a passion for what they were doing. So understand that, because kids, you guys have like a sixth sense that you can sniff out a phony pretty easy. When you get older, it becomes hard. I think we lose that. But remember how it was for those teachers that made those connections for you, to be able to be real with those kids, not being their best friends, but because you care for them, you're going to push them in the right direction. And again, just being real.
Those are both, I completely envision how those two skills would be important at every environment and every grade level. One of the things that's always struck me watching the educators in my family, and I'm going to make some generalizations here, but it requires a high degree of organization and planning. And sometimes the extroverts who love being around people, I know my husband was a teacher for a while and he struggled with managing those two things. Do you find that to be true in some of your colleagues, and maybe how have you worked through balancing things that you're not as strong at throughout your career?
Okay, well, I'll take a stab at that one first. Yeah, you have to be extremely organized. And I can tell you that as a teacher, I mean, if you're in a high school, you'll have multiple groups of kids coming through the way it's set up now, 42 minutes, however long, and you have to make sure that you're ready to go. You have to have, backup ideas in case a lesson goes south, it doesn't work the way it should, or whatever. You just have to have enough plans. And then if you're sick, because you get sick, you have to make sure that you have good planning, that you may be out for some reason, that somebody could come along and make sure the education continues. So there are a lot of things that you can you have to work on. Now, as an administrator, some of you may want to become a teacher and then become a principal. I worked in large districts there were 42 elementary schools in Toledo Public, and I watched how some people were there till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You have to then understand what deserves your attention. What are some of those things that I really need to be focusing on? And this is, I don't know, it's one of the things I've learned is that a lot of paperwork that came across my desk really didn't demand much of my attention. And where I made my most gains was being out in the classrooms, being out with the teachers and with the students, and spending as little time as I could in that office, because I found the problems as they were happening. So each job will have a different skill set of what you really need to be able to do and to accomplish, but you still have to have that organization where you can get things done on time, and your staff will be looking towards you, or your kids will be looking towards you. And if you don't know your information, it's really easy for them to lose, trust or faith in you. So you have to have that stuff organizing together.
May I answer our questions in the chat, Abby? Lonny did a great job with that one. Can I
get to those? Yeah, I see a few related to special education, so maybe you could talk to that.
So I think Isabella and Emma both asked about special education. Having experience with a person in your family maybe that has special needs definitely brings that passion for our field. But I think that there's more than just caring for and loving and building that rapport with our special needs students. There is a lot of work to make sure you're meeting needs and accommodating and making sure our students with disabilities get out and into the classrooms and they're supported and they have the services they need. Besides the tons of paperwork that goes along with it, which is very surprising to many first-year teachers, how much paperwork goes with that. But if you have a passion for students and people with disabilities, absolutely, this is a great field for you. But don't think that you're going to have your own classroom. Special ed teachers spend lots of time in general ed classrooms and lots of times in different places. You will maybe be in your classroom 25% of your day and out in other classrooms the rest of your day. So it is sometimes a little bit different than what people think of, like a first grade teacher who's in her or his classroom all day. Special ed teachers, we are a different breed. We are very adaptable and can teach in lots of different places. I have taught in a locker room when there's no place left, and it's the one place I can give a test and tutor in. It's just, you have to be comfortable with that. So I'm hoping Emma and Sid or Isabel, that I answered your questions there about special education. If not, ask.
So there was a question in there too about, I think it was Sid asked, is there any career regrets? That's a good question. To be quite honest, I do kind of have a regret in a way. I don't know if it's a regret, but it's more of a hardship. I grew up in the community where I became superintendent, and that can be a very heavy toll. I'm an individual who relationships mean everything to me. But when you get into that role as a superintendent, you'll take a lot of slings and arrows, and especially from people that you're close with. And so you really have to soul search if you're going to do a job that is of that level in the place where you spent your entire life or several generations of your family coming through. So for me, it was difficult. I don't know if it was a regret. I did the best I could on it, but there are things that also with time, because my kids were really, really young at that time. And you can sometimes you can't get back the time with your family and the things that are most important. So I'm glad I corrected that, because it can consume you, and to do justice to it, sometimes you need to be able to have maybe a different stage in life, where the things that are at home, I don't want to, just be aware that there's a cost to everything. And so I don't know if that's regret. Now, Sid, I have a question too. I don't know if you're related to the Mr. Adkins or at Port Clinton. And if so, he is the gold standard for superintendents, in my opinion, in the region. So just had to throw that shout out there.
I don't have any regrets either. I was a principal for a very short period of time. My husband and I decided to adopt. We had 4 and we adopted 3 boys, and I left the principal and went back to classroom because I needed to do exactly what you're talking about, balance my work and my life. And being mom at that moment was more important than being an administrator. So I will tell you, I took a lot of grief going back into the classroom from other teachers, like, you were up there, why would you do that? But it's not a regret. It was just that piece that I had to make the right choice for my family at that time. And I don't regret that at all. Being mom first is always important.
Those are both really insightful comments, and what I like about it is, one, you've clearly reflected on it, and it is challenging to do that in the moment. So just pointing that out for people that are about to enter their career, and taking time to settle with yourself how situations are matching with your expectations and your desires, and being brave enough to change your mind is sort of what I hear there. But we have heard a question here about leaving work and work-life balance. Maybe you guys could talk to that and how it's evolved over your career, because I imagine that differs at different stages, and we're obviously talking to a lot of potential young professionals. So what might they need to know entering the education and training career cluster? And feel free, either of you.
Yeah, so the time commitment, I graduated college in 1996 with my bachelor's in education from Cleveland State. And I got married that same year, and we didn't have kids for 4 years or so, but it was just good sense. I continued to go to my master's degree right away before my first child was born. So that was something I would say is, try to do the family planning as much as you can, because, it can tend to dominate your life because you're in classes, you're doing a new job, and you're trying to build all these things ahead of time. And what I would say is, while it was frantic and crazy early on, it did pay off a lot, because then it freed up my time to actually have a better paying job, more opportunity before the kids actually came along. And then, of course, that takes a lot of time. And so that was really where I was able to focus a little bit more. But just be cautious on that, because I can see and there's and among the the administrative ranks, there's a high level of divorce, at least there used to be, for folks that are in those high pressure jobs. So just remember that it takes a toll on relationships, and there's only so much you can give. And here's the other thing I'll warn you: don't give your best to people that are outside of your close circle, because sometimes you'll spend everything you have, and then when you get home, you're exhausted and you give them the leftovers. So you really have to be cognizant of doing that, is that you give your best to everybody you can understand, but there's also a time where you have to break away and refresh yourself, because I don't know about you, but we're all flesh and blood. We all get sick, we all get tired. And you have to have encouragement too. So, what I would say also is, at the end of the day, if you guys are thinking about education, there's probably been a good teacher or somebody in your life that's encouraged you. Do me a favor, before the school year's over, if those people are still around, reach out to them and tell them how much that you appreciate them, because sometimes students don't have the wherewithal to think about that. But as a teacher, as an administrator, when I see a kid that tells me that I made a difference for them or I inspired them, I'm telling you what, it's like I have another 2-3 weeks of nonstop energy that it just keeps going. So don't underestimate that as a student, how much that means to the adults that are in your life.
Love it. Really good point. Trisha, I know you spoke earlier about your kids and that meaning a lot for yours. Anything else to add?
I think for me, it was really important, and Lonny addressed it, that I worked with kids with emotional and behavior disorders, and you almost love them like your own. But when you have to step away sometimes, and you have to remind yourself that I'm a mom first, right? I'm a wife first, and otherwise you can really get kind of lost because their need is so great, and sometimes it feels like there's no one else in their corner. So I think that that's really important to set some boundaries. So I did my master's and my doctorate when I had children. I woke up every morning at 4 o'clock and did my schoolwork before my work day. And so when Lonny talks about scheduling your time, if you think about doing 2 hours of master's or doctoral work before you go to work, and then you're still taking care of 7 kids and a husband and all of those things, you really have to be tough. And I mean tough. Like, have some resilience and strength and be like, okay, I can't get all these things today. What am I going to get done? It's a difficult sometimes, but mom first, always, wife first, always, because later, those are the relationships we have, right? So all those classrooms of kids that I absolutely adored are all doing well, I hope, but the relationship I have now are with my children and my grandchildren and my husband. And I think that's important to remember because we can get lost as teachers. So should you tell your teachers at the end of the year? No, you tell your teachers at any moment, Sid, that you think that they did a great job, because Lonny's right. There is nothing like walking into a grocery store and getting a hug from a lady that you have not seen for 15 years, and her daughter says, "Oh, you're my mom's favorite teacher." I mean, oh my goodness, it'll just light up your day and give you that energy for the next 6 months, right? Because as teachers, we plant seeds all the time. We just never know where they're going to bloom and grow. And so we plant them and we water them and we care for them, but we don't see how they bloom later. So please, please, Sid, anytime you see a favorite teacher, you tell her or him.
Absolutely.
I love that. All right, we have 4 minutes left because we're going to go back to the main room before the session is done for just a minute. And I love these 2 last questions I don't think we got to. So tell us about a favorite lesson that you've done with a spin on it, if you recall any. And then I do want to close with a question about how you deal with discrimination potentially in the workplace, and maybe anything you'd have in that regard. So lesson first, and then we'll cover discrimination. Anything come to mind?
Well, I think when it comes to lessons, things that are not just from the textbook, trying to be outside of the box and being very creative, allowing kids to chase some of their own passions and giving them choice. And that's hard because most of us were never trained to do it that way. But project-based learning is something, if you guys aren't keyed into, try to key into that because kids actually have to show their meaning for their work. And as far as discrimination, is that what you're saying? What was the other question, Abby?
The other question was how you suggest dealing with potential discrimination in the workplace.
Well, I can tell you just from my own personal, my dad was a migrant worker, and we came from, we lived out in the country, and I was one of the few kids that had brown skin. But I can tell you is that the vast majority of people that I came across as my teachers, the ones that made the biggest, they didn't look like me, but they cared. And so I think a lot of it is just the caring piece, is that you treat people like the way you wanted to be treated. And I didn't need anybody feeling sorry for me. What I needed is somebody to show me what I didn't know, because all of our friends were people that were laborers. We didn't know anybody that was in the education world or higher ed. And so all I needed was just saying, hey, if you do these things, you can enter into that world. And I can tell you, you'll experience people not liking you for all different kinds, and we all experience that. But I think we can't get hung up on that whole thing. Is we just got to just be good to everybody, work the best that we can. If you're a student or whatever, if you have to report some of these things to the people that are in charge, you do that. But by and large, I tell you, I've been all over in urbans and rurals. And you know what? I've always had good experiences. Rarely do I have somebody that, was doing something like that. And if it was, we addressed it.
Thank you.
So lesson plans. I think Lonny hit it right. If you have a kid who loves basketball, allow him to read books and experience basketball. If you have a student I had a student that was sure that he wanted to study nuclear energy as a 6th grader. So guess what? He did a project on nuclear energy, and I learned a lot that year. I will have to tell you, I did not know a lot of things that I learned with him. I think that it's important that kids find and connect relevance to what they're learning and to what they want to know. Right? And discrimination. So now I have this beautiful diverse family I told you about, 7 kids, some are adopted. Here's the key, and it's very simple. Create the rapport that you want with your students, just like you would want yourself or your siblings or your cousins treated. That rapport is everything. Kindness, caring, polite. If you don't know something, it's okay. If you don't know, you have a new student who is a Jehovah's Witness and you don't know anything about their religion, ask. What a rapport you build by learning what is so important to them. And it's okay. You are not going to know everything about every religion in the world or every cultural background. I mean, we think in Ohio, we have all these beautiful, diverse immigrants. We have Somalians and Nepalese, and you don't know that as a first-year teacher. It's okay. Just build the rapport and the connections with those kids, and the other things come along easily.
Thank you both for those comments. We have about 2 minutes left, so I guess I would just turn it back to Trisha and Lonny each for a minute. Anything else you feel like students need to hear today or know? What should they be doing right now to get ready for the future?
I would just say don't be discouraged because it's easy as going through. I mean, there's nothing easy about life. I mean, life is going to throw its curveballs at you. We don't control the events that happen to us, but we do control the way we respond to the events in our lives. And if you're measured and do the very best you can on those responses, your outcomes will most likely be better. And then I would say if education is your passion, reach back out to your school district and ask for ways to shadow, to be inside the classrooms. Because that is something that most of our districts will do. And I'll give you this, if I can help you connect, part of my job is I work with all 27 school districts and I know a lot of people. Reach out to me, say, hey, Dr. Rivera, you spoke to us, please let me know. I'll be more than willing to make a connection to help you guys get some experience.
You are interested in inclusive education, come see me at Firelands. We are half the tuition of BG, and you are still a Bowling Green State University grad, right? You can go to a hockey game if you want. But if you are interested in that pre-K to grade 5, I can help you at Firelands. We have a great program. If you want to start at Firelands and then move on over to Maine and teach art, or I've had those students as well. So if you are looking at that next step, I'll be more than happy to help you also. So just reach out to people. They'll help you. People have helped us. We'll help you also.
You guys have been fabulous. Thank you so much.
You guys sticking with us. We appreciate your guys' attendance today. Some closing thoughts on this matter specifically. You guys are the future. And there's no easier way to say that. Our community rises and falls based on the next wave of talent. And you guys are all talented. So I hope today was a way for you guys to explore how you could maximize some of those talents, how you can maximize them not only for your own enjoyment in a career that you love, but also hopefully monetarily that pays the bills too. That kind of effort is what will make this community great for years to come. So again, we appreciate your time. One matter of housekeeping, we are going to send out some communication after this. So please be on the lookout in your email. We will be contacting you about today's event early next week. So again, we thank you. Please enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe, everybody.